The Commanders are ready to bring football back to the RFK site, but the clock is ticking and it's time for DC to step up. That and more right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders. I'm David Harrison, your guy on the ground covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Not only am I here with you 5 days a week, but I'm also covering the Commanders locally for WUSA9.com, as well as for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. I want to thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or view today. Whether you're an everydayer or you're just coming through, I appreciate you all the same. But to those everydayers who make this a regular part of your daily routine, a special thank you goes out to you. For everybody who's here for the first time, I appreciate you finding the show. Hopefully you like what you hear and you come back again real soon. Coming up on today's episode, we'll close with how the Commanders are preserving tradition at Northwest Stadium while plotting the future of their heart in Washington, D.C. Then we're going to take a deep dive into the community-driven planning behind the long-term project surrounding the new stadium. But first, what the team says has to happen now to bring football back to the RFK site before it starts to get a little bit too late. So we spoke to a team source recently about the RFK Stadium site project and about everything kind of surrounding it in the vote that the Washington, D.C. City Council still has to go through. So I'm going to share with you today is just some of the information that I received from that conversation with that source, who, again, is close to the project, certainly close enough to go with this information with confidence, right? So the RFK project obviously is something that is real, and it's something that is almost tangible in the sense that we're almost ready to take action. What's holding it up right now is the Washington, D.C. City Council looking to potentially delay a vote for approving the final plans and approving the plans to get this thing going and underway. Right now, there is a tentative deadline, right? It's not a firm deadline, but a tentative deadline, July 15th. That is when our understanding is the mayor's office wants the city council to vote on the RFK Stadium project. And it's a very important date. There's urgency here because of what everything kind of it gets attached to with that timeline, right? So the end state is obviously 2030. 2030's regular season. That is when the Washington Commanders want to unveil this new stadium. They want to open it officially. They want to be playing football at the beginning of the 2030 regular season. Now, that seems like a long way away in a lot of senses, right? And to some, the question of, well, what's a couple months to fully vet? What's a couple months to get even more questions in and do all these things, maybe do some more studies and all that stuff. But to our source close to the team, what you're really doing is you're losing flexibility the longer you wait. And that flexibility is better served for when the what ifs happen, right? This is a major project. This isn't just a stadium. It's really about the entire community that we'll get into here in just a little bit. And whenever you're doing a project like this, there's going to inevitably be a hurdle that you need to clear. Sometimes it's anticipated, but it's still going to take time. Sometimes it's unanticipated, and it's going to take even a little bit more time because you have to then assess the situation, make plans for what's coming up, and go forward with the best course of action. What they don't want to do is use that flexibility, use that time that they could use to handle those what ifs and those unanticipated problems right now, and basically burn the flexibility they would have to take care of those issues then, now waiting on the city council to realize that this is a good deal and do all those things and go forward with the project. So that is part of the reason for the urgency in wanting to get this moving forward as quickly as possible. There's also another part of it that is a reason for some urgency behind the team and the mayor's office wanting this vote to happen sooner rather than later, and that is the potential cost of waiting, right? You all heard the phrase, time is money. Well, in this case, time is very much actual money, right? You're talking about a stadium, you're talking about a facility that is looking to host more than just football games. You're talking about concerts, you're talking about major events, and these major events need time. These major events have to have certain earmarks met, certain benchmarks met before they'll fully consider a venue for a site. You're talking about Super Bowls, obviously. You're talking about the Women's World Cup. You're even talking about potentially WrestleMania, right? These are major events, economic boom events that cannot be planned for, cannot be proposed unless the stadium project is at a certain benchmark. And some of these events, the Women's World Cup, right? FIFA, things like that, WrestleMania, they're not going to want to commit to a venue necessarily unless so much progress. There's got to be a certain level of confidence. Okay, if we commit to you, your facility is actually going to be, one, done, two, able to support what we're trying to do, and three, it's going to fit the vision for what we want for this type of event, right? So all of those things, if you delay the vote by 2 months, like into the fall, right, then you're delaying how quickly. That's 2 months you delay the ability to propose for some of these items. And if this specific, say the Women's World Cup, for example, wants to make a decision 2 months ahead of when you're ready to propose, they're going to make their decision. And now you're looking at the next Women's World Cup and you're just delaying, these potential items. So, I mean, the simplest way I can put it is no stadium, no pitch, right? You can't pitch what you don't have. The source claims that the project could bring up to $14 billion in direct revenue and economic impact to DC. That's according to estimates and studies on what could happen. So again, you want to get that money flowing as soon as possible. The money's going to go out, right? But delaying the money going out just delays the money coming in. And that's a simplistic way of putting it, right? And any council member would tell you that it's not that easy. It's not that simple. And certainly those conversations need to be had. But when you consider what the city of New Orleans just did with an older stadium that really isn't even as sexy as this new one is probably going to be in Washington, D.C., a study done by the LSU School of Business conducted after the Super Bowl found that there was a $1.25 billion impact that the 2025 Super Bowl had on the state of Louisiana, specifically, obviously, inside the city of New Orleans, because it's not just the Super Bowl. It's also the events that are happening around the Super Bowl. And again, this stadium is going to be much more built for supporting these types of events and supporting these additional revenue streams. That event, it not only revitalized the local economy, but it boosted tourism, created long-term opportunity, created jobs, created a tax revenue influx, right? And it gave the city's hospitality industry another window to capitalize on, right? Obviously, New Orleans has like Mardi Gras and all that other stuff. And certainly it is a tourist attraction in and of itself, but it gave the city another opportunity to generate tourism funds outside of all those natural things. So again, you have a city like DC that's already a tourist attraction, already has some events that bring people in. Now you're just adding another possibility for that. So the bottom line is DC really can't afford to fumble the timing on this thing, right? The best thing for everybody is to get this thing done in a timely fashion so that plans, projects, groundbreaking, all that stuff can take place. Because at the end of the day, the team wants to break ground in 2026. They want to shovel in dirt. They want to do all these things. They want to get these things going. They want to find contractors, do all this stuff. And none of that can move forward until the DC City Council approves this plan. So July 15th is the mark that we're looking for. However, that's not the only thing going on. If it gets approved, the stadium won't just serve the Washington Commanders. It's designed to reshape the whole neighborhood. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by Rougiette Ready. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Ready. Rougiette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pill that can take hours, Rougiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Rougiette is helping real people feel more confident, more present, and more in control. I like that it's completely online, no awkward pharmacy stops, just a quick consult with a board-certified doctor and discreet shipping to your door. So head to Rougiette.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information. This project isn't just about football. It's about building an ecosystem that actually works for the community. It's more than a stadium. It's a community vision. We continue our conversation here on Locked On Commanders about the RFK Stadium project. Again, spoke to a source close to the contract situation or the stadium situation, the project, and the comings and goings between the team, and the DC City Council and the mayor's office, all that stuff. Got some very interesting information and some clarification on some things that I want to share with you here on today's episode. So again, the project's not just about football, it's about the ecosystem, right? So the team has been attending in various forms, right? Personnel are going to these town hall meetings and they're listening to the people. They're listening to the people talk about their concerns, about what they're needing, about what they're wanting. And look, you're not going to make everybody happy. Like no major project like this is going to make everybody happy. That's my opinion. And I think that it's pretty well rooted in historical evidence, right? But it doesn't mean that the people involved aren't necessarily going to go out there and do everything they can to try and make this as, all encompassing as possible to make sure that everybody benefits from it. And the source really shared an interesting story about, city development and all this stuff and lessons learned from other projects and brought up a little grocery store analogy or example, right? And it really kind of resonates, right? Like we talk about building affordable housing, and obviously that's part of this project is to build affordable housing in and around the area and all that stuff. But what's going to draw the people there, right? Like you can't go to a stadium and pay your bills. You can't go to a stadium and get your, basic needs. So having a grocery store, you got to have a grocery store in the area. If you build affordable housing, but there's no grocery store, there's no infrastructure to support the people who live in the houses, nobody's going to want to go live there. At the same time, if you don't have anybody living there, you can't get the grocery store and the retailers and the people that are needed to support the people, provide the service that the people need to go support. Right. So it's kind of an egg or a chicken scenario, but you've got to make sure that it's all there at the same time in order to help make sure that this thing is a success. So understanding what the people need, whether it's a grocery store, there's a DC vault organization that does pole vaulting that's going to be nearby. How are they affected and what are their needs and what is it that they're looking for? Parks, soccer fields, transportation, like all of it is being taken under consideration. All of it is important to everybody. Therefore, it's important to all the people involved in this project, the team, the mayor's office, city council, all, in lockstep on that one. So, retailers, services, event space, all of it is being designed with the future of the residents in mind, and again, you're not going to make everybody happy. Obviously, somebody out there is going to have a problem with it. And there's always going to be somebody who's not completely happy with what's going on when you're taking under or overtaking big projects like this, but the efforts are being made there because they don't want to fail the neighborhood, right? And if you don't have the right supports in place, whether it be a transportation, whether it be an infrastructure, whether it be services, things like that, then certainly you can miss the mark on something like this. And then once it's done, it's not like you can just tear it all down and scrap it and rebuild it, right? So Washington is trying to learn from other cities' mistakes. And part of the conversation, even just getting to the stadium specifically, brought up that, a very common complaint of the Mercedes-Benz stadium in Atlanta, Georgia, the Atlanta Falcons stadium, from fans and from people attending concerts and things like that, is that it takes forever to get into the stadium. And our source said that, they've studied things like that in that stadium specifically and what has kind of gone right there, what's kind of gone wrong there, and how they can learn from those lessons and make sure that this is done even better. Mercedes-Benz Stadium has 20,000 parking spots in Atlanta, Georgia. However, some of those parking spots are a 20-minute walk away from the actual stadium. So our source says that the team is taking consideration into, if we've got to have some remote parking, because again, the current plan has about 8,000 parking spots in and among like the stadium structure itself. So the rest of your parking is going to be remote parking and you're going to have to walk a little bit or be transported by a bus or something like that. So there's thought and consideration being put into what can we do for those people as they walk up to the stadium to make sure that the walk isn't just, this trudge up a hill or up a sidewalk or whatever it is, that it's part of the experience, that walking to the stadium is actually part of the fun of going to the stadium. So things like that, right? Activations and using technology and all that stuff. So all of that kind of stuff is really being brought into the forefront when they're talking about how they plan this thing and really just studying across the board what other stadiums have done. We talked about how Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas has not a retractable dome, but it's got retractable walls. There's walls on the stadium that actually move and can open up, views or light. I've never been to the stadium, but that kind of thing. So, whether it's a retractable roof, whether it's retractable walls, whether it's a movable part of the stadium, like there's all these things that are being considered. And something that actually they wanted to make very clear to us is the idea of a retractable roof hasn't actually been discarded. Like I know there have been, thoughts or reports that was not going to be a thing, but that actually hasn't been ruled out completely. It also hasn't been verified that it's going to be a part of the stadium, but certainly, at this juncture, a lot of things are still on the table for what the new stadium could have and what the new stadium could potentially bring. And as much as this new stadium is about moving forward for the organization and getting a new home, obviously, right, we all know RFK, it's a return to your old home, right? It's a return to your former home and all those things. Whether or not RFK is going to be in the name, like RFK Stadium, brought to you by Northwest, or like Northwest Stadium at RFK, or something like that, is not necessarily solidified at this moment. But what we were promised is that there are going to be homages paid to the heritage of the Washington football franchise, right? And there's going to be parts there of the old RFK. It's not about separating the past from the future. It's about uniting the two, and about making fans who maybe feel tied to the heritage part of the organization, but not necessarily this new part, be okay with taking both of those in. They don't want them to exist at the same time. They want them to exist together, right? Coexist together, to where people who are proud of the history are also proud of the future and are proud to call it their favorite NFL team, and call the new stadium, whatever it's called at the RFK site, the new home, the new old home of the organization. So pride, taking care of the community, making sure it's done the right way the first time, right? Because that's another thing, talking about the urgency of the stadium project. Like, the one thing we were told is that in no way, shape, or form is anybody willing to cut corners anywhere on this thing. So again, if it starts late and it gets finished late because of it, then that's going to be something that they're going to have to kind of answer for. But, that's just even more reason to have this vote as quickly as possible and get this thing underway as quickly as possible as well. So while the team fights for its future, it is still and already spending big time to make the present better at Northwest Stadium. That's next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you in part by Monarch Money. Have you ever wished you managed your money better and managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing savings or planning for something big, like maybe a future game at a brand new stadium, Monarch gives you the control and clarity you need. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's your complete financial command center. It links all your accounts, investments, and spending, so you see everything in one place. I started using it recently and realized how much those random subscriptions were adding up. Seeing it all clearly makes a difference day to day. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Investing in the present while building the future is really what the organization is all about right now. Again, talking about the new stadium project, some updates that we got from a source close to the project, close to the process of getting situation or getting this whole thing approved and getting underway. The future is obviously years away, right? But the Commanders are already making sure that you, the fans and the players and everybody else that attends anything Washington Commanders related, are feeling the difference for the better. So they've already made some significant upgrades to Northwest Stadium, just in the first 2 years that Josh Harris was, at the controls of the ownership group and everything like that. And what our source told us is that as of this year, the team will hit that $100 million mark. If you remember Josh Harris kind of talking about the $100 million investment in upgrades and renovations to team investments or team structures and organizational structures, including the stadium, the team is going to hit that $100 million mark. And by the end of it, it's actually going to go over $100 million. So we're talking over $100 million spent with part of that money going to upgrade and improve a stadium experience that, quite frankly, is only going to last for the next 5 years, right? Like, that's the intent. So again, that kind of shows the intent and really the spirit of what this organization, what this ownership group is really trying to do. So you've already seen improvements to concessions, suites, fan experiences, things like that, but there's more upgrades coming. Didn't find out what upgrades specifically are coming, but what we did find out is that the team is very, very excited for you, for us, for everybody to kind of see these upgrades and really get to experience them. So you have that to look forward to as well. And again, just trying to reconnect with the history, right? There's been a lot of conversations, and this isn't a conversation that came from like this, or this is a side conversation being had elsewhere, but like the new alternate uniform or a throwback uniform option, like everybody's really excited, right? Like, what is that throwback uniform going to look like? Is it going to be a variation of a logo? Is it going to be just a return to a straight up logo? I think if it's the return of an old logo, I think you're probably looking at the Spear logo coming back. If it's a variation of an old logo, I think you're probably looking at the old R, like the 1970, 71 R, probably without the feather, right? So I think like you're going to get one of those two variations as a potential throwback. Again, honoring the legacy, honoring the heritage of the team. And again, that's just my opinion. That's not coming from any source or anything like that. So take that with a grain of salt. That's not coming from a place of knowledge. It's coming from a place of just trying to put myself in the organization's shoes, navigating the political landscape, the social landscape, and all that other stuff, trying to find that medium between making people happy, reestablishing that heritage, because Josh Harris is, part of that heritage as well. He grew up watching this team like a lot of you did at RFK, under the old logos and names and all that stuff. And he doesn't want to forget those things. He wants to honor them as much as he possibly can. So I think there's a line there that has to be kind of walked to do that. But I think they're trying to find that line, and definitely to them, it's worth the risk of maybe overstepping or going the wrong way a little bit here or there to try and find that sweet spot. So I think they're really going to do that. And honestly, I think at the end of the day, you guys are going to be happy with the effort and what's coming. So the legacy is going to be honored. The future is going to be set up for success. I mean, just again, the organization is doing everything they can. And the end game for all this is to build you, fans, something that you can be proud of, something that you can brag about, something you can go to your rival fans and flex on them about. And so not just when it's finished, but also right now, right? That effort isn't 2030. It's not, hey, in 2030, we're going to make you guys really proud. No, even right now, even in the old stadium, even in the not, necessarily the most, high end, fixes and all that stuff, they're still doing what they can with what they have to make that better, including, I mean, if you drive past the facility in Ashburn, you'll see the bubble is down. The bubble's getting a new shell. You know what I mean? So they're doing stuff there. The players are getting a new locker room in Ashburn. I know they're incredibly excited about it. I'm excited about it for them. You know what I mean? So yeah, a lot of investments going on, a lot of things happening, and this team is looking to move forward, right? You see it with Dan Quinn, you see it with Adam Peters. Aggression is the name of the game. Let's not tiptoe around this thing. Let's not move slow. Let's get in this thing. Let's do it right, but let's do it aggressively. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Hopefully you enjoyed some of those updates. Again, we got from a source very close to the situation, as much as we can give you as of right now. Again, July 15th is the date that we're all going to be watching for. Hopefully the DC City Council can find it within themselves. We're also told by the source that the team is answering every question, providing everything they can to make the city council as comfortable as possible with moving this deal forward. And basically the feeling is, if the city council does not vote on July 15th, it's not going to be because the team did anything to not make them feel as comfortable as possible with the deal. And basically the team is doing everything they can, which is all we can ask them to do in the meantime. So now all eyes are on the DC City Council to make their decision. Next time on Locked On Commanders, can any wide receivers take advantage of Terry McLaurin's absence to become future fixations of the team? Why won't Washington re-sign players like De'Ami Brown? What's the strategy behind it? And did they waste an opportunity not bringing back Jeremy Chin? In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, you can text them directly to me by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. For your next listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting as the Commanders push for a new stadium deal and roster moves heat up the league worldwide or league-wide. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino break down every deal and how it impacts NFL teams' futures. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get this podcast. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day, everydayers. I see you, I appreciate you, and I thank you. Until next time, stay safe, be good to one another. We will talk again soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.